Terry, you need to make me the host.
Okay, hold on a second. I gotta figure out how to do it over here. Okay, I think I did it. This is and the icon. Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Labor Shift, the best 60 minutes on the clock. I'm Reverend Terry Melvin, the president of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, and your host for Labor Shift. Now, tonight we're going to talk about school openings and what's going on with that. But I happen to have two of the most powerful Black labor leaders, women, in this movement. I have Dr. Loretta Johnson, who spent years in the teaching field, is Secretary Treasurer of the American Federation of Teachers. She's told folks that she's retiring from her position as Secretary Treasurer, but that's great because we got so much other work for her to do in this movement. So we're looking forward to her getting released from AFT so we can really put her to work. Then we have the powerful Rebecca Pringle, who is the vice president running mate. In this election in 2020, we have got a sister in the vice president ticket on a major ticket in this country. Now, before we start talking about school openings, I got to ask these two sisters. First, starting with you, Dr. Johnson, what does this mean to you? You have been in this movement for over 50 years. You have seen us struggle to get Democrats elected. You have seen us struggle to get people that elected that's going to help us in the movement. What do you feel about Joe Biden's pick of Kamala Harris as vice president?
Dr. I'm Johnson. So thankful that I lived to see this. We've been fighting a long while for recognition for African-American people. We've been voting Democratic all our lives and never saw a lot for it. And I think that the movement Black Lives Matter have cracked that stone. And I was so excited today when I saw that. I shed a tear because the fight, and so many before me that set the stage for this. And I'm just thankful that the Lord let me be here to see it happen. You know, I said that when Barack Obama became president, nobody would believe in their lifetime that they see a president. Now in my lifetime, I've seen an African-American president, and we're gonna see an African-American woman vice president. We broke the ice because the first woman that's going to get elected is going to be an African-American woman. So Shirley Chisholm opened the door when she ran for president 20, 30 years ago. It's taken us that long, but I don't think it's going to take us much longer.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. And Becky Pringle, you are about to take on a massive job as the president of the NEA. And looking at that job ahead of you, what does it mean to have Kamala Harris as the vice president? Because I'm calling it as it is. We got to win this election. What does it mean for you to have Kamala Harris in the position she's in today and in the position she'll be in after the election?
Terry, just let me say, you can see me grinning from ear to ear. I am so incredibly excited. I'm thrilled. I'm hopeful for so many reasons. You know, even in this place in my life, I will always be that little Black girl from North Philly. And for me to live to see a Black woman on the ticket for the presidency, just makes that little Black girl sing. And I know the impact it will have on all those Black girls all over this country. I am so excited. And Senator Harris, I will tell you that we had her at our NEA convention last year. And I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with her at great length for the first time. And she was so incredibly knowledgeable about, supportive of, and Loretta knows this, our educators, our not just our teachers, but our support staff as well. She really cared about what we had to say. She respected our profession, and she talked about how she was going to work with us to actually change what's happening, most especially for our students of color. I could not be more thrilled. And I tell you what it made me think of right away was Sojourner Truth.
All right.
Oh my goodness. Loretta lifted up Shirley Chisholm, but Sojourner Truth, Terry, she said, if women want any rights more than what they's got, why don't they just take them and not be talking about it? That's exactly what Senator Harris has done all her life, and she will continue to do that as the Vice President of the United States of America. We're going to get it done.
All right, all right. And I just got to take some props from our CBTU delegates at our 48th International Convention in May of 2019. We did a straw poll. And if you recall back then, there was 22 people in the race for president. We did a straw poll of our delegates, about 1,000 delegates that we had at convention. And out of that straw poll, we came out with Joe Biden as a presidential candidate and Kamala Harris as a vice presidential candidate. And I guess we were a bit clairvoyant, because that is exact, and it was overwhelming, both of them in the president's spot and in the vice president's slot. So it just goes to tell you, when Black labor talks, we know what we're talking about. Awesome, awesome.
Wow.
So I just want to give you, both of you, an opportunity. If there's anything else you want to share on this historic moment for Black women and the Black race in this country. I mean, I want to give you a couple minutes to just, Becky, anything else you want to add to that before we get on to the topic of the show for today?
So Loretta, talked about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm not sure I thought I would see this day either, when people all over this country, Black and brown people, some of our API leaders, our indigenous leaders, and our white allies and co-conspirators affirmatively saying that Black lives matter. This is also an historic moment. And I agree with Loretta. I think it actually led the way to Vice President Biden actually making this choice. And now here we are. We're in a moment where we have to, right now, have an aspirational vision of this country actually living up to its promise, and how we as leaders in this moment must center ourselves in and lead with race and equity, fairness, and justice. The selection of Senator Harris allows us to talk about that. We'll be talking about it in the mainstream media. We'll be talking about it around our dinner tables. We will be uniting for NEA. We will be uniting our members in this nation to make it so, because we need a new president, as we all know. And with Kamala Harris, right there on that ticket, we can talk about those issues that are so important to our community. Economic justice, health justice. We can talk about the food insecurities and the housing insecurities. We can, of course, talk about criminal justice. All of those things for us impact the education of our students. We have in Senator Harris a partner that we are anxious and so hopeful to work with right now, as we actually talk about and create that vision, but also as we already start to claim this victory and plan that agenda so we can change what's happening in this country.
Awesome, awesome. Dr. Johnson, any final words on this subject of Kamala Harris?
I unmute. Becky just said it so eloquently. Look, Black Lives Matter has opened so many doors for us right now. If you remember the task force I led in the AFT, this was one of the ways that we talked about, that we had to have more than us talking to each other. We had to talk to white people. And the white people joined this Black Lives Matter. And you see the difference. These youngsters open up that door. Pamela Harris, I've met with her just as Becky has. And in talking to her, she has the issues. You know, every election we say, this is the most important election of your life, you have to vote. Black women always voted right.
That's right.
And it was, the data always showed we voted right. Whether we got what we voted for wasn't the issue. The issue was that we voted. And right, Black women and women are going to come out, yes, and we're going to vote. And I'm just so excited that I'm going to be around to vote for a Black woman as vice president of these United States.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. Thank you, Becky, for those comments. But this is real. This is what we're talking about. This is what we're dealing with every day. So let's move on. Tonight's episode is entitled To School or Not to School. That is the question. And let me say, this is the question that I believe many of us are asking ourselves. And I'm lucky enough that my children are grown and they're out of the house, they own their own. But I do have grandchildren that I love dearly. And that means that this issue is very important to me. And I must say that I'm biased. I'm personally and emotionally invested in this conversation. There are questions I have both as a unionist and as a grandparent. So I may go off script, and just like we started out, different than what we thought we were going to start out. We don't know how this conversation is going to end, but I got some questions that I need to ask, and I want some answers from these women that have all the answers when it comes to education, as it relates from my point of view anyway. Some schools have already opened, and if you watch the news, the results have been disastrous. One school opened and closed within a day. Another school suspended a child for publicizing a jam-packed hallways, but then had to close due to contamination. We can't eat inside a restaurant for an hour or two, but have to send our children, our babies, to confined classrooms for 8 hours. What do we do about this? The schools in our communities were already underfunded and overcrowded. Our teachers are already overworked and underpaid. Add in a deadly virus, and we have some serious issues. We have concerns. We have questions, and we need some guidance. I do want to make one thing clear about tonight's show. We're not telling you what to do. CBTU is not telling you. Our guests are not telling you. Not even the doctor that we're going to have later on tonight is not going to tell you what to do. The choice you are being forced to make is a deeply personal choice. No one can speak of the gravity of this decision and the consequence it will have on you or your family. This government has failed to give us viable options. Instead, we have all left with bad choices. But we hope to give you information tonight that can help shape your decision. We want to offer you as much insight and perspective as possible to make the best decision for you and your loved ones. In that vein, we've also set aside time tonight to take your questions off our Facebook and YouTube comment section. So please get those questions in so near the end of the show, we'll be able to answer those questions. We've got these two very powerful women with us. Normally I would go through a whole accolade, but if I just talked about how great they are and the work they've done in the movement, that could take me the whole hour that I have for the show. So I'm just going to thank them for being here with us tonight. And I'm going to start with Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson, if you could, please let everybody know what your union, the American Federation of Teachers, has been up to regarding COVID, and what is your union's position on school openings? Dr.
Well, first
Johnson.
of all, let me thank you and CBTU for this opportunity to have a discussion about this. I think it's great. And I'm a part of your family. As you well know, I'm on your board, and yes, I'm a part of the Baltimore City chapter of CBTU. So I just want to give a little accolades out there for you and doing this. But the AFT position on school openings is simple. We want kids back in person, and we want instruction, and we want all of the things above. But we want it based on science, on health. You know, that's important to us. We want schools to reopen, and we want them to be safe and to reopen safely. And that's why we at AFT, you know, we've been planning since April to reopen schools. We put out a 20-page statement on how to reopen schools safely. And our plan details 3 conditions extensively to for schools to build and to reopen. The first one was low infection rates and adequate testing in the region where school and learning is being considered. That's what we're saying. And there's no barriers that we you know, cannot rebuild the school and deal with including reopening the schools and dealing with the virus and getting it under control. The second was public health safeguards, starting with masks, social distancing, cleaning, ventilation, hand washing, and reasonable accommodation for those at risk. Let me just say to you, in the city, some of these schools don't have windows. We don't have the ventilation. And so you have to have a condition for opening that school. And you got to have the safety. And third, we need the necessary resources. As Becky said earlier, we have to fight for the monies. As you know, the AFT has supported the HERO Act. There was money in there. You need to have at least $3 trillion to open these schools, where parents and students and school staff and the union can be involved in getting what they need in there. That's the key. We can't listen to a crazy president. We have to listen to science. And it's so many steps there. You know, first they tell us the children was immune to it. Now we see kids are not immune to it. So if they're carriers, you send your kid to school, they bring it back home to you, you take it to your mom and dad and your relatives that wouldn't ordinarily get it. This is important. Teachers, and I want to make this clear, teachers and school employees want to go to work. We're frontline at just like doctors and the nurses had to be frontline. We're frontline. We're not saying we won't work, but it makes no sense the first rate of what we think about is how do we have safety with our kids. If you remember, when the firearms was in the schools, who went and covered their bodies over the students to keep them from getting shot? Their teachers. Their teachers put their lives on the line at all times. But at this point, teachers are saying, we already know that the virus is there. Why can't we do something with science? Science is saying you have to do this, this, and this. If you do this and this and this, you will see the teachers will fall right in line, and so will other school employees. It's a fight. We have always been underfunded in public schools. I'll say it again. We have always been underfunded in public schools. We cannot open up schools with the underfunding we're already getting with COVID-19 raving.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. I really appreciate that insight that you guys are doing over there. Sister Becky Pringle, as I said several times already, you are about to take on a massive responsibility of a massive union at a crazy time in our history in this country. What can you share with us what NEA and you are planning regarding this COVID situation, and what's your position on school opening?
So let me begin where Loretta started, thanking you and CBTU for putting this together and for your long-standing advocacy on the part of your fellow unionists and racial and social justice issues. And then Loretta, congratulations. My goodness, my partner in crime. Please don't go too far. I know you're retiring soon, but don't go too far. We have work to do. We need a new president. Did I mention that? We need a new president, Loretta. So I know that you're going to be right there helping us get that done. I also want to begin the way Loretta began by saying, because you can't say this enough, I have so many conversations and interviews, and it's implied that teachers and our support staff don't want to be in school. We want to be with our students. We were plucked from them with a moment's notice. Sometimes, in some instances, our teachers and our support staff, they weren't even able to gather up their materials. They didn't have their tools with them or anything. And they were told, you're not going back into the school. We, like so many others, were not prepared to go to this new reality, this new virtual reality. And yet you saw in the spring, Terry, you saw educators stepping up in such a big way. We had bus drivers driving their buses around, creating hotspots. We had teachers starting food pantries because we know that our students rely on meals at school. And guess what? We watch them save part of their lunch and put it in their backpack because they know their families need that food too. So when we started initially standing in those gaps that we knew were immediately created, it wasn't just for the students, it was for parents, it was for the community, because we knew that our schools serve as this hub of the community. And so when we were no longer in the school buildings, there were not only additional gaps created, but the gaps that we already knew, the gaps of inequity were growing even larger. And so you saw us step right up, right from the beginning. We want to be with our students. And I want to make something clear. Whatever happens, we're going to keep working to make sure that our students are learning. We're going to do whatever it takes to ensure that every one of them is getting a quality education. So regardless of what we do. But Terry, when you started, you described a chaotic mess. And that's where we are right now. We have schools opening and closing. We have schools opening and one wing of the school closes down, or one classroom closes down, or, just that class, or the whole district, or they open, they close, they open, they close. This is chaos. That is not an environment where we can really focus on quality learning. One thing I want to add, and you saw this happening in the description you gave, Terry, one thing I want to add, and by the way, NEA and AFT, there's no light between us. What Loretta just said, that's exactly where we are too. The one thing I would add, and you saw this right away, you saw this happen right away in those schools that didn't have this part that we also add in our conditions for opening schools safely and equitably. And that is that the schools must have a plan for not if the students and teachers get sick, it's when they do. So when they test positive for COVID-19, what are the plans to ensure that the rest of the school community is kept safe? What are we going to do to isolate those students who test positive, those teachers and other support staff who test positive? And so that also has to be in place. What are we going to do? So here we are in this chaos, and we know why, because we lack leadership from the White House. We have Betsy DeVos and Donald Trump bullying us into sending our students back to school in unsafe environments. Instead of working with us and providing us the funding, what are they doing? They're threatening to take away that scarce funding that Loretta just talked about. By the way, most people don't know, we never got back to pre-2008 funding for our schools when we were in the last recession. We never did. So they're threatening to take that away from us. And they have governors in some states that are following along with that, threatening us in schools where we need more resources. So we're adding that as well. So we like AFT put out a really comprehensive document. It's called All Hands on Deck. And we were intentional about that name because we know that we can't do this alone in our community and we're in the education, and we're not going to do that. We're reaching out to healthcare professionals. You know that NEA and AFT joined in a joint letter with the American Academy of Pediatricians, because when they came out initially and said kids need to be in school for their mental health and socialization and all of that, we agree with that. And there were people who were saying, oh, the pediatrician said, send the kids back to school. And the pediatrician said, whoa, that's not what we said. We said, send them back when it's safe. And Loretta laid out all of those conditions for when it's safe. We know it's not safe if the transmission rate is not down. We know it's not safe if they don't have all of the things that Loretta laid out. It's not safe. And so what I'm saying and what we're saying is we're done. We're done with that. We already know it's not safe. So what are we doing right now to ensure that our students continue to learn and the teaching and learning environment that they are in that's keeping them safe is one that is rooted and centered in equity. And so what I've called for as my first act as president-elect is for the NEA to allocate significant resources to assisting our states and our local affiliates in actually making sure that we are collaborating with our parents and the community, that shared responsibility to ensure that our students have the digital tools, that they have access to the internet, that we are improving our professional practice around online learning, that we are building learning communities among our teachers and other educators, that we are attending to the mental health of our students. They are suffering from trauma, that we are thinking about all of those things and we're doing it in collaboration with each other. So that is what we're focused on, Terry. We want our students to return to schools and our educators to return to schools that are safe and equitable.
Thank you so much for that. You know what I truly believe, as you said, Rebecca, when you were just talking, is that the only way that we're going to get through this is by working together. And the question I want to pose to both of you, I'll start with you, Becky, this time, is what can parents and grandparents and other caregivers do to support the staff in the schools, the teachers, the support staff, those that are in the school that want to be in the school, welcoming the children in a safe environment? What can we do as parents, grandparents, and just community support people to help you in this effort?
So what we're focused on is continue to build that partnership with parents and community members. I mentioned our document, All Hands on Deck, and that's available at our site, educatingthroughcrisis.org. So go to that. We have just so many resources that are available for parents and others who want to work with us to ensure that our students are safe and that they are learning. So I encourage you to do that. That's number one. And then just reach out to teachers and other educators and have conversations. Discuss what your needs and concerns are, because guess what? Our parents are talking about what they need to not only support their students, but to support their families. How can we help them with that? If they are struggling with feeding their families, or they're worried about being evicted from their house, what can we come together to do to support them in a way that they are also safe? So we want to build that partnership with them and have them understand that we care about not only their child, but that entire family. And then lastly, I want to say this. We need everyone who likes you, who knows you, who loves you, or who intends to keep living with you, to flood the offices of your senators and your members of Congress, because we need them to stand strong. Loretta said they passed the HEROES Act, but they need to stand strong, right? Because they're going to go into negotiations. We need you to lift up your voices right now and not stop. It is unacceptable that they're asking our students and the men and women who have dedicated their lives to educating America's students to go back into school buildings that are not safe. It is unacceptable that they're asking us to do it. We need you to get on the line and do that. And then lastly, we need you to vote. Every decision that's made for our students and our classrooms is a political one. We have got to ensure that we have elected and appointed leaders that care about our kids. That's what we want our parents to do in partnership with us to change what's happening for our students.
Thank you so much, Becky. Dr. Johnson, can you?
Well, you know, I can only echo what Becky just said. The most important piece for parents is to recognize the power and voice that they have in this and not make it look like teachers are fighting not to go to work. They should be with us, demanding the funding, bringing the voices. We're with them. We know that some people, to go to work, they need childcare. We're there with them with that. But they're not going to get any of that if schools open up, kids get sick and close down.
Right.
Just, I say to them, remember March, when this hit, I got up one morning and the governor was on television saying schools was closed for 15 days. Nobody knew what was going on. Everything was just like Becky says, in chaos. We can't play Russian roulette with our kids' life. And that's what's happening. We're gonna put the kid that is immune, he gonna learn, the kid that's not immune gonna be sick. Majority of our kids now, African-American kids, have breathing problems and asthma problems. Those kids aren't going to make it in a school that's not functioning clean. And so we're going to put kid against kid, parent against parent, and then parents against teachers. As Becky says, the board members has to be told. This has to be worked out with all of us. And nobody wants to be in school in person no more than teachers do. That is their job. That's what they went to school for, to teach, to work with students, to work with the child. And as Becky talked about, the bus driver, that's what they're trained for, to bring kids to school. The paraprofessional who supports the teachers in the classroom, that's what their jobs are. So everybody on our side want this, but we also want a safe place for not only me, but for my students. Then we want the health care. And I can't say it no better than Becky. This is something we all agree on, both organizations agree on. We're not split at all. There's no cracks there.
All right.
We all want to get back into schools.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. I mean, it is so great to hear these two huge institutions that's representing teachers all across this country that is in such agreement on what we need. We have to coordinate and we have to work together. But there comes a time that there's only so much that parents and teachers can do together. There comes a time when we need to hear from our health professionals about what are the best practices. What do we need to be mindful of? And to get some of these answers, we have with us tonight, these ladies are going to stay with us, but we have with us tonight Dr. Joaquin Morante, He is a pulmonary and critical care doctor at Jacobi Medical Center in the Bronx, New York. He was working during New York's COVID spike and has firsthand experience with this virus. He's joining us tonight from the hospital itself. Thank you for being here with us, Dr. Marante. When New York was erupting with COVID, where hospitals had no more beds and trucks had to be used as temporary morgues, you were there. Many people still think this virus is a hoax. Could you please give us some of your personal experience with COVID-19? What did you see that you want to impart to the people?
Well, thank you for having me this evening with CBTU. I'm actually work today, but I'm calling from home. What did we see? I mean, I think that the numbers speak for itself when we say 30,000, probably underestimated, but 30,000 deaths here in New York State, 25,000 underestimated probably here in New York City. That is an astounding and staggering number for any community, but we're talking about one city to carry the brunt off. Those are 25,000 human beings, mothers, fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers, aunts and uncles that are no longer with us because of this disease. I think that the lessons here in New York City are that when this virus engages a community, it can overwhelm the resource of a community quite quickly, rather quickly. In our case, in March, April, when coronavirus or COVID-19 first hit us, it was similar to what we're hearing now. Lots of mixed messages. Should you wear a surgical mask? Should you wear an N95 mask? Is this is it aerosolization? Is it droplets that move that transmit this virus? I think that this is definitely a virus that we're continuing to learn, and we have to be humble with that fact. You know, we have to be humble with what we know and what we don't know. So you know, there are many lessons here in New York City, but I think that the nation now is learning some of those lessons. Number one, health resources can be overwhelmed quite quickly from this virus. And number two, we're still really learning. You know, we don't have a cure. We have some treatments that, you know, the evidence has shown may improve outcomes, but you know, by and large, we're still in the nascent phase of trying to figure out what coronavirus COVID-19 really is.
Thank you for sharing that, Doc. Sadly, I think there's still some folks around that don't understand the severity of this global pandemic. The current occupant, and I'm going to refrain from using explicitives today. Not that I don't want to, but I'm just not going to do it today. But the current occupant in the White House said COVID-19 doesn't harm children. The next day I read how a little child died of it. It was tragic, but reaffirmed that no good information is coming from this government. Do you know how COVID affects children? What can you tell us about the impact of COVID on the young ones?
So I'll preface everything with I say that I'm not a pediatrician. I'm an adult pulmonary critical care physician, but you know, we study the research. Does COVID affect children? Can children be infected with the virus? There is no doubt. There's no doubt. There are actually many, you know, studies looking at viral load within children less than 10, and showing that there's just as much virus when you swab the nasopharynx as in adults. Now, those children's ability to transmit the virus is what we're still kind of learning. There's, if you look recently out of South Korea, there was a and it's a widely published in terms of reported study of almost 65,000 people. And what they did was they contact traced. They looked at, 10,000 people who were infected and how many people then were infected from those 10,000, looking at a base. And what you found was that And one of the most important figures out of that study was that children from 10 to 19 were able to transmit the virus just as easily as adults are able to transmit the virus. Less so they saw in children less than 10. Doesn't mean that they're not infected. It just means in terms of transmissibility, what they're able to kind of pass on to close contacts, family members, teachers, and all those and folks who they come in contact with. In terms of in the United States, if you look at like the CDC's numbers, just as recent as July 21st, and you'll see it in the guidance that they place for schools, say about 6.6% of the total COVID cases in the United States are children. Less than 1%, 0.1 are actually have died from COVID-19 in terms of our children. So our children, when we look at hospitalizations and we look at the total number, adults are mostly affected in terms of hospitalizations by COVID-19. But we can assume from the data that children can get infected just like any other person. A lot of them tend to be asymptomatic, but it doesn't mean that they can't transmit. And what that does is then you begin to see that impact within a community.
Asymptomatic, doctor, meaning that they may be walking around not showing any symptoms.
Exactly.
At all, but they could still have it and pass it on to other people, right?
Very true. So they may not complain of any symptoms. Frequently, the symptoms that you will see in children are similar to adults: fever, headache. They'll have upper respiratory symptoms such as cough, stuffy nose. Some will have diarrhea. It looks like a virus, but the majority of them, when they can swab positive, but they're not showing any of those things. They don't have the fever, but it doesn't mean that they can't transmit it. It looks like the data is suggesting, especially in children 10 and above, that they're able to transmit it just as readily as you and I. And that's an important fact. I mean, there are other ways that we have seen children impacted. There is the report of the multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, which presents, it can affect many different organ systems in children, the heart. Many have diarrhea, profound hypotension. We've seen it at my hospital. I've treated people as old or as young as 22 with this. And many of them recover with proper treatment, but it still requires, we're still talking about human lives that are going into the hospital and parents who are quite distressed for, their young one. So, it's important to know what we know and and acknowledge what we don't know. And I think that we're still very much learning this virus, SARS-CoV-2.
And the one thing we're finding out is that there's so much conflicting information. It is good to get some clarity and people talk to somebody that can lay it out and tell the truth. There's so much confusion that it makes it hard to get the facts. But you as a doctor, you are a doctor and also a father of 2 children, I understand. I believe one's school age and the other one's in daycare. As a doctor and a dad, what advice would you give other parents? Once again, we don't want to tell people what to do, but you serve 2 key roles. You got to decide for yourself what's in the best interest of your family with your children. And as a doctor, having the medical knowledge that you have, what would you tell parents that they need to be looking out for when they make their decision?
Sure. Yeah, I have a preschooler, a pre-K age son, and my daughter is going into the 1st grade. And very much, my wife and I have been conflicted about what to do here in New York City, especially after all the trauma that we've gone through and, talking my children go to New York City public schools. I think that, if we look at CDC guidance, and then you look at also the mixed results internationally, right? So you look at, say, the example of Israel, which opened up and then saw a rise in cases rather quickly. Or then you look at some other, they use the example of Denmark, which opened up, saw an increase in cases transiently when they opened up schools and then a decrease after. It's really a mixed bag, right? There is no definitive model. For myself, I think, and what the scientists, in terms of what the scientific community is saying is, if you open up, you have to look at your community numbers and then also the numbers in terms of the age range of those children that are going into the school, right? So if your community numbers are low, right, well, maybe there are opportunities for opening up schools. But if your community numbers and the majority of the United States where we see these big, where we see large transmission and large cases of people are sick, we should not be talking about opening up schools. I think we should be talking about the public health measures that need to be taken to be able to control this virus. I think talking about schools maybe putting, the cart in front of the horse. So for my wife and I, that's one of the things that we've looked at is, well, how safe is it for our own children to go to school? Not only for my children, but for my mother, their grandmother, and for the school teachers that are there. How are we going to keep everybody safe? Especially when I just don't look at my own family. Being a doctor means I have to look at my community. And, am I doing the right thing for my family and my community in sending my children to school? Has the school done its proper, have they implemented the necessary measures to ensure that we're going to respond to this pandemic? So what are we going to do if there are positive cases in the school? I still don't know here in New York City. I'm still trying to figure out what are the measures that we're going to take if we begin to see positive cases in the elementary schools. Do we shut down the school? How are we going to do contact tracing? How are those things happening? And so I think, some questions they've tried to answer some questions, well, we're going to change the filters. We're going to make sure that before anybody goes into a classroom, we check for ventilation. I'm still really not sure about all those things in terms of if they've properly been checked. But also, what is the plan A and plan B for when I believe inevitably we do see positive cases? Because to say that we're not going to see some positivity at some point is to really be unrealistic. We don't have, we still see positive cases in the community now. In New York City, it's 1%. That's a very low figure. I think my personal opinion is we can have a conversation at least about opening up the schools if the proper measures are taken. We can have the conversation because our overall of the cases that are tested, 1% are coming back positive. In other parts of the country, if you're talking about opening up the schools in Florida, well, I think you're probably out of your mind, because we still haven't controlled and taken the necessary public health measures. And there's a lot of questions to be asked about the school. And I think, Ms. Pringle and Dr. Johnson really answered those questions in terms of, who's going to be wearing face masks? How are we going to be cohorting children? How are we ensuring proper ventilation? Who's going to be cleaning these rooms? We say we're going to be doing, but I don't understand. I haven't seen the logistics. I'm very involved in our school, and the principal of our school is kind of just learning these things now, and it's August 11th today. They want to open up school, what seems like, right around the corner. So I think that there's a lot that we still have to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doc. I want to take this opportunity to open up the line, if you will, to get some questions from our folks that have been watching online. If there's any questions that have come through, if you could send them to me. I haven't seen any yet. But if you have any questions and you're online, you can put them into the chat portion of it so that we can get those questions to our panelists. Let me just ask this: the question of mask or no mask in school openings. We've seen some schools open around the country with the option to wear masks. To me, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a teacher, but I'm not a fool either. either you need masks or you don't need masks. But to tell people you're in a closed-in situation that you wear them if you want to, or you don't wear them, I mean, that don't make sense. Doc, help me out with this.
Yeah, I think it's irresponsible at this point to say you shouldn't wear a mask, or it's up to you to wear a mask. Masks, we see that masks work in decreasing the transmission of the virus. Now, and if you're going to have some people who are going to wear some and other people who aren't, it really, you're not being clear. You're not being clear, and you're risking the health of anyone in that community. And I think that those are some of the things that we need to do in terms of as a community. Is we need to, obviously we haven't gotten the message out to everybody. Even, as I walk the streets here in New York City, I think, I still suffer from our own PTSD of what we went through just a month and a half ago, which it seems like, or maybe a little bit more at this point. And when I see people who don't have masks, I think I shake my head, because we know there are some definites. Masks work, distancing works. There are some things that work, and not only work for coronavirus, but work for the flu and other viruses. It works. And this is not an issue of freedom or anything else. This is an issue of being a good community member and being respectful and caring for one another.
Okay, so let me take that a step further when we talk about the mask. We have a question from one of our members that's asking, if we expect the children to wear masks all day, how do we expect the teachers, and this will go to Dr. Johnson and Becky, how do we expect the teachers to be able to enforce this rule that the students, the children, keep masks on all day if they don't want to keep them on, particularly the younger children? Becky?
So I'll go, yeah, it's a huge problem. Our teachers are very concerned about that. But what we found is that in those districts where the teachers, the support staff, the parents, the administrators, the union itself are working together to solve these problems, that's when we see we see that collaboration, and we see much more joint decision-making that results in doing what's best for our students. So when we talk about enforcing wearing of masks, when the parents send their students to school and the parents are saying you will wear a mask, it is required, and everyone else is wearing that mask and everyone else is enforcing it, it's when you're doing it together that you're going to be much more successful. But you are correct. We're very worried about students coming from families where we have some parents saying, I want to exercise my right that I don't have to wear a mask. For us, what we're saying is that a school district needs to make clear that that is a condition upon which the students can come into the school, the parents themselves can come into the school, just like restaurants and other businesses are saying no mask, no entry. The same has to be true for our schools.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Johnson, you have anything you want to add to that? Dr. Johnson, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I wasn't muted and I started talking. Look, we have data to show that the masks work. So we have to wear them. That's what we're talking about. What is safe? What is the health way? What is the doctor saying? And it shouldn't be optional if that's the safety measure, is what Becky is saying. A kid can't exercise, or a teacher can't exercise their right to say, well, I don't want a mask, because it affects not them, it affects everybody that you say. So if the mask is part of the safety measure, then it should be mandated.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. We have a question from Abraham Johnson that says, I don't know if his relation is, how do overcrowded schools maintain social distance? We got this, the schools are already overcrowded before they close down. Now they're talking about opening them back up. how are we going to do social distancing in these overcrowded schools?
So we can, unless we have additional resources to do it. And those additional resources should go toward hiring additional staff, partnering with businesses and other organizations to think about how we actually position the students, either outside or in a museum, having different options so we can spread them out. Many of the school districts, as I'm sure you've heard, have worked with the parents to determine whether or not what will work best for them, whether they are on an A and B schedule on these days and that day, so that not as many students are together at the same time. But it all starts with having the resources available. I don't know if you know this, but already almost 1 million educators have been laid off. And we stand, while we're all waiting for the Senate to do its job, we stand to lose almost 2 million more. That is not going in the right direction when it comes to creating an environment where we can socially distance our students.
Right.
Dr. Johnson.
Becky is absolutely right. It has to be a plan, and it's not going in the right direction if we don't have the money. I keep saying safety and health. They have to have a cleanup crew in the schools every day. They have to have all of the services that students need, a nurse, a doctor. As Becky said earlier, how do we identify the student that has it and don't have it? What do we do? How do we quarantine one, or even a teacher or a paraprofessional or a bus driver? All of those questions can't be answered unless we have the funds. They can be answered, but we need the funds and to sit down and plan that. That's the key. Teachers need to be involved. Workers need to be involved in the plan, because we are still everybody's gonna be, COVID-19 is very dangerous illness. Everybody is gonna be at risk, no matter what we do, even with the health and safety issues. When we put those in place, we still at risk in some ways. But we're willing to take that risk if you give us a fair plan hand. And the fair plan hand is to have a plan, have the money, put the safety in place, do the mandate of the mask, and then you will see teachers and workers just as involved as they've always been in schools. Teachers have been working unfunded for years. People that graduate with a 4-year bachelor's degree know they're not going to be rich if they go into teaching. They can't, no expectations. They go in it because they love it. The expectation that they're going to become rich is never there. And they must be educated over and over again. Teachers have to have masters. Some go on and get doctorates because they're just like doctors. They prescribe education and they diagnose education for each and every individual student that they see. And all we are asking for is that you give us an opportunity to do our job, but give us what we need, and that's the tools of setting and planning how we fight COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. I have one last question, which I'm going to lob over to Becky, and that is, does the HEROES Act provide funding for distant learning? Is coming from one of our chapter presidents, Courtney Jr.
It does. One of the things that we really fought hard with and worked with Congress on is actually ensuring that we could increase the funding to what's called the E-rate. It is a program that has worked in years past, but it has been underfunded or defunded in a way that does not suggest that the people in elected positions understand that 12 million of our students don't have access to the internet. They don't have access to digital tools, or if they have digital tools in their homes, a laptop or even an iPhone, it might be one. And parents are working on it, or they're multiple students and they don't have enough. And so we wanted to ensure that we had funding in that legislation that allowed for that. But not only that, we know that our schools will not get the funding they need if we are not ensuring that our states and our localities are funded in a way that addresses the economic crisis that we are in right now. Because when our students come to us, we treat them and we look at them as whole people. They can't learn if they're hungry. They can't learn if they're worried about whether they're going to be homeless tomorrow. They can't learn, certainly, if they don't have access to high quality health care. So all of those issues have to be addressed with the funding, this funding that we are fighting so hard for. And those kinds of things are included in the HEROES Act.
Thank you so much, Becky. I want to give, we're going to be coming to a close now, but I want to give each one of you an opportunity, 60 seconds or so, to just, what is that nugget that you can leave our viewers with tonight based on what we've been talking about tonight, which is to open or not to open schools, safety or not safety, what do they need to be looking at? What is the nugget? We'll start with Dr. Johnson, we'll go to Becky, and we will end with Dr. Morante. So, Dr. Johnson.
Well, we're having discussions like we're having tonight. Gives us an opportunity also to hear, and for other people to hear what we are thinking and how we should open schools. We got a plan. I keep saying that over and over again. The plan is most important. We don't have any leadership. We have a president and Becky DuBois who doesn't care anything about our school, doesn't care anything about where we're going. But we have organizations like AFT and NEA who are going to be the voice for education. And we are going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to put our voice out there. We're going to continue to put plans on the table. Our locals are trying to negotiate fairness for students, and I'll work with them. In Florida, we went to court. We're in court. We're doing the things we have to do in order to see that our students in America get a fair education.
Thank you
and
so
I'll
much.
let Becky close it out.
Becky, we're going to go to Becky and then to Dr. Johnson.
So first of all, I want to say thank you, Terry, for this opportunity. And I want to thank Dr. Morante. When you described the PTSD you were going through, it certainly reminded both of my kids live in New York City. And we know the trauma that our healthcare professionals went through. And I just thank you for not only doing what you did, but also in this moment, lifting up your voice so that we have someone who helps us make this decision. The nugget I'd like to leave with your listening audience is we can only focus on solving this problem right now. You know, as educators, we are going to always stand in the gaps for our babies. We're going to do that. But we also have to lift up our heads in this moment because we have gaps that have been there forever. The inequities that have been built into our public school systems have been there forever. And so even in this moment, where we're talking about how we reopen our school buildings safely and equitably, we've got to be thinking about always that aspirational vision. And so I would ask your listeners to join us. We are leading a movement to reclaim public education as a common good, as the foundation of this democracy. And then we are transforming it, because we must, into that racial and socially just and equitable education system that prepares every student, everyone, to live into their brilliance.
Thank you so much, Sister Pringle. Dr. Morante.
I want to thank you actually for those kind words. And I'll right back at both of you. Thank you for your leadership in helping to lead the way to educate our children. and educate mine. I'm with you. We are with you. As healthcare professionals, we're with you. I think that the nugget is that we are in this together. There is no them versus us, or we are in this together. That's what this is going to take to be able to find the right solution. We need to take our time and go slowly with this. There should be no rush to run back into a burning building. We should be looking at this with clear factual, look at the data, be respectful of the science, also be humble about what we don't know. I feel like sometimes we're making a lot of decisions not exercising humility. And that would be, kind of my words would be, go slow, take your time, make sure that all your measures are taken. As a critical care physician, I always look at everything. What is my plan B when my plan A goes wrong, right? Because, you have very narrow window to try to help somebody. And if something goes wrong, what am I going to do next? And if we don't have that in this situation, I think that we need to take a step back until everybody is comfortable, because we're talking about teachers and we're talking about our babies. And as a community, they rely on us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moran. So let me, I really feel that we could talk about this all night long. This is such an important issue to so many of our members and so many of our family members and community members across this country. We're all looking at this issue to open or not to open our schools. We can talk all night. We probably wouldn't come up with a final answer. But I want to take an opportunity right now to thank my guests that were here with us tonight, the powerful Dr. Loretta Johnson and the powerful Dr. Rebecca Pringle, President-elect of NEA, Dr. Joaquin Morante, physician and surgeon in his own right. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to share with all of us your vast knowledge that you have on these issues that are so important to all of us. You all have so much work to do, and we're so grateful for the work that you do in the labor movement and the work that you do in the education movement, the work that you do in the medical field. It all comes together to make our community even better each day that you work. So we thank you for being here tonight. We thank you for the work that you do. We thank you for the work that you're going to do. This ends our 8th episode of Labor Shift. We'll be back on August 25th. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got a serious election coming up ahead of us. I want to thank all of you that were out in our listening audience today, that listened to us, and those that will pick up this episode later on and listen to it. I hope that you were able to gain some insight on this very important issue from these very talented individuals that we had on tonight. If you can, please visit our website at cbtu.org and donate to CBTU so we can continue to raise our voice against injustice and for a progressive shift in power. 2020 is going to be a new year. 2020 is going to bring change to this country. I want to be a part of that change, and I hope that you want to be a part of that change, to have a country that we can all be proud of and have leadership that we can count on in time of need. Good night, and God bless all of you, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Good night, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.